We're going to call the meeting to order. First item on the agenda will be roll call.
Good evening, folks. Roll call, Richard Collins. Here. Michael Hurd.
Here.
Todd Russell. James Petrin. Carolyn Toll.
Here.
Abigail Carmen.
Here.
Tracy Pope.
Here.
Thank you.
I'm going to appoint both Tracy and Abigail to sit in for the two vacant for Todd and Jim. Our minutes from September 6th meeting.
I make a motion to accept the minutes from September 6th as read.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes from September 12th.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I'd like to abstain from that vote. I wasn't
the
present.
12th?
I wasn't present for that meeting.
September 12th meeting.
I'll make a motion we accept the minutes as read for September 12th.
I'll second.
Have a motion, a second. All in favor? Aye. Under old business, Claremont Speedway, LLC, 425 Washington Street, seeking a variance from section 22-166 in an RR district permitted use of the city zoning ordinance to permit development of a seasonal campground as a second principal use at 282 Thrasher Road, tax map 71, lot 4. Zoning district is an R1. This is continued from September 16th, and the public hearing has been closed. There is just comment amongst us and voting on it. I don't know, has anybody got anything else they would like to discuss amongst us before we have a motion one way or another?
I thought we would have a motion and then discussion, but that's
Well,
okay.
if there's
That's
any,
okay.
I didn't know if there was any other,
Any
before
process
we made a
questions.
motion, thought
Oh, okay.
process, but if there
All right.
isn't, can I have a motion? I'm not hard to get along with.
Is there discussion?
I've gone over what was handed in. Unfortunately, I wasn't here last month. I reviewed the minutes that was handed through our packet. I'm comfortable with what I have. I don't think that I was the only one that was missing, unfortunately.
I'd say, if I may, there is, as a deliberative session, there's no new information being presented. But if you have any sort of, if you want to discuss or work out before you take a motion, any questions you might have, either with the memo that was distributed in your last packet, or any of the points of information that you may have. I would think that some discussion to that point would be reasonable. Obviously, there's no public input, but it's certainly something that the zoning board can address. Now, if you like, I could review the memo. Like I said, it is in the record and it's available to anyone who wishes to
The
have
applicant's
it.
seen this?
Yes.
The applicant has.
There was, and as you can see, if there was a motion to approve, I could maybe read through what information we have. I think it's fairly straightforward. Could read through the variance criteria and what the review process would be. I could try to include a little bit of text explaining each of the 5 points in the memo. But if that helps with you folks in terms of getting everything straight in your head, and then I could review verbally review the conditions of approval that would be recommended if you decide to make a motion to approve. It's up to you what you like to hear or what you like to discuss.
First of all, I would like to say that this memorandum that I got was very, very well put together, and I appreciate that, Mike. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, given that, I think as far as the breakdown of findings of fact, I thought that that was very accurate against all the notes that I kept. So, I don't have any questions at this time. I did have some questions on the conditions, what it meant. So that's what I'm coming forward at this time with.
Okay. Anybody else would like to review the contents of the memo or skip to the conditions?
Well, I guess my question would be the list of conditions. Just for the fact, did this get read in? Not being here, so.
It has not. These are conditions that staff put together based on findings of fact, based on.
The 3 pages of fact finding. I guess the applicant has been, and the public's had a chance to know if, no, yes?
It's been publicly available. One abutter asked for a copy of it.
Okay.
But it has been distributed to the applicant. The applicant did have one piece of feedback on one of the conditions. We can talk about that, but it wasn't a substantial change
Okay.
in my mind.
Because those are where my questions are, but I don't know. I'm not speaking for the rest of the board.
Well, I'm going over these again to make sure. I guess what would you have for questions, Carolyn, regarding?
I would like to have Mike read them out loud.
Okay.
At that point, and then I can question, and maybe it'll spur some questions for other people at the same time.
Want to just go one at a time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Please.
So if the ZBA made a motion to approve, considering all the testimony that was provided and certain information presented as part of this public hearing process, the conditions recommended would be: number 1, this approval is for the operation of a seasonal campground on the site as presented in this application, amended material, and testimony provided by the applicant. Straightforward. 2, any change in use or expansion of use will require zoning and site plan review. The property owner shall consult with the Planning and Development Department regarding change in use or expansion of use prior to commencing said change.
Question, so that means that at some point, if he decided to make it a non-seasonal and make it a is it called transient? He could just come back before the zoning board? Planning board?
You'd have to go to the planning.
That's certainly a point of discussion, and we would review it at the time, see how the campground's been operating, what the functional limitations are, and how it might be. I'd say the discussion point for I think discussion point as part of testimony has been the presumption that this is a seasonal campground. If it transfers to a transient campground, that would effectively void the variance. And we have some discussion to that point in later conditions, and I'll get to that.
Okay.
Number 3, the owner shall notify the Planning and Development Department in writing whenever there is a change to the Claremont Speedway campground agreement. This notice shall summarize the changes into the agreement. So each time we don't need a copy of the agreement, but say we've changed it from 2 dogs to 1 dog, that kind of thing. 4, the applicant shall obtain and receive all necessary permits and approvals as determined by local, state, and federal governments. This includes site plan approval from the Claremont Planning Board, necessary state and/or federal permits for wastewater treatment, stormwater management, and erosion control, or statements of compliance with said regulations. No work is permitted to commence until such plans and permits or appropriate statements of compliance with state and federal regulations are submitted to and approved by the Planning and Development Department. Really straightforward. 5, the owner shall utilize the municipal water supply for the campground use. Use of a community well for any campground use will, without prior review and approval by the city and state, shall void this variance. The statements in testimony has been that, the applicant will seek to have a municipal connection. And it has been in the context of the campground itself. So I think it's appropriate to condition for the campground use. All set? Okay. 6, full-time campground manager shall reside on-site for the purpose of overall campground maintenance and enforcement of individual campsite permits in accordance with the Claremont Speedway Campground Agreement. The owner shall notify the Fire and Planning and Development Departments if no campsites are occupied and a full-time campground manager is not present. So essentially, when there are folks there, it's a full-time sort of resident manager should be there. There may be times or periods where all campsites are vacant, and this is intended for so if the campground manager, so to keep that oversight that folks are concerned about for maintenance of the campsites and operation of the campground. If the campground is vacant, say in the winter nobody decides to stay over, they don't need a full-time manager. It's important also to keep this, keep the fire department aware of this for public safety reasons. Is that there?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now this one, number 7, I'm going to read the original, and I would suggest a modification, and I'll tell you what that is. So the original is, RVs and camper units shall remain on site for the season which they have campsite permit. Any campground activity that appears in the opinion of Planning and Development Department to be contrary to the application materials, amended material, or testimony by the applicant shall be in violation of this variance. Ongoing violations shall be grounds to void this variance. What I would suggest is, while these are seasonal campsites, it seems that there should be some opportunity for folks to be able to leave the site on an itinerant basis. So the question is, striking the first sentence, and striking the first sentence, I'll read the condition over again. Any campground activity that appears in the opinion of Planning and Development Department to be contrary to the application materials, amended material, or testimony by the applicant shall be in violation of this variance. Ongoing violations shall be grounds to void this variance. So in that change, if somebody wants to take their camper, say for a week somewhere else, and then bring it back, they would have that opportunity. But it would be limited to something that's not a transient, we're going to need to keep an eye on it to keep it a seasonal campground anyway. And so those two sentences as kept, in my mind, would be consistent with the testimony and the requirements of the variance.
Mike,
Questions?
I'm having trouble understanding the part, or testimony by the applicant shall be in violation of the variance. I guess it's the or testimony
Right.
by
So
the applicant.
it could be and
I
or.
don't, I'm sorry?
It could be and or. It's supposed to be inclusive. So there may be material, application materials that were submitted, or amended materials that were submitted, or statements made during the public hearing.
By the
And those all
applicant.
constitute the substance of what the variance proposal is. So that's why we said or. It could be and or.
Okay.
So in other words, if I was a seasonal camper, I couldn't pull in on Thursday night and stay to Sunday and leave and then pull in the next Thursday and stay. I couldn't just come on weekends and put my camper there, even though I paid for the season, and not be there. I can't in and out, even though I've technically paid for that site for the season. You're saying that's not permissible?
Well, so my understanding is that, and this is also something that I think those of you on the board that have this experience can draw on that personal knowledge in your determination. That seasonal campgrounds do not operate that way.
Right.
Right.
As you described. There might be a period once in a while that a person decides to pull their camper out for a sojourn somewhere else.
Right.
But since they pay the seasonal rates, they tend to come back to the same site. But the drawback and so to be totally upfront with you, my original version was possibly overly restrictive because the agreement itself seemed vague on this matter. I read a couple times through. I couldn't quite see whether there was a catch point in the campsite agreement, in the campsite permit, of leaving how many times is too many times. If that makes sense. So that's where, just to finish the thought, that's where if we see a lot of in and out activity, we would call the owner on that and say, this is not looking like the seasonal campground that you described, and we find a resolution through that process.
But who's going to govern? Who, hopefully the campground would govern such case if it does. But who's to say reasonable moving in and out?
Number 8.
Like you said, from personal experience, I wouldn't move my camper from where it is for a week. It's way too much work. That's my personal, where my camper's at. I can understand we say if someone wants to go to Old Orchard Beach for a week and then come back because of family vacation, but who's going to determine, like Tracy said, well, we're going to do it once this month, we're going to do it once next month, we're going to do it once the following month, we're in the 6 months, we're going to pull it out 1 week every month. Mm-hmm. And I'm just playing devil's advocate here. Right. Who is going to be the one to determine that, that camper's moved 5 times this season? Is it going to rely on a abutter calling and complaining and going against the proposed campground, or are we going to hope that the proposed campground is going to say, hey, you can't do this?
A lot of the conditions for staying in the campground are spelled out in the campsite permit. Mm-hmm. And there's the operator, the owner, reserves the right to evict anybody who violates that permit, local or state laws and regulations. So the question of who would be sort of enforcing it, we would see the owner as the primary enforcer, their agent as primary enforcer of the permits. The next level is the city, and if there's any observed activity that appears to be inconsistent with this zoning permit, this is a condition that you guys can modify as you see fit. You are the board deciding on these conditions. So if you feel that there's a frequency that's too much, set the limit. But that's based on your judgment.
And here again, playing devil's advocate, I think that we're looking at this as the positive side of the coin. If the motion were to be approved, I feel that there should be some form of limitation in that, marking that.
I agree.
Not saying that, like I said, that someone's going to, that the management's going to allow it to happen, that it's not going to be happening. I think it's just a safety net for everybody involved. That if it does go through, it gives them the defined line in the sand. It gives the abutters the assurance, just like they're going to be hooked up to municipal water. there will be no well water used. You know, that's part of the proposed approval. And like I said, I think I would feel more comfortable with, you know, good, you have the opportunity to move your camper out once in a season and bring it back. Any more than that would constitute a transient use.
So just so you know, my experience has been strictly with transient sites, traveling cross-country or staying in, you know, certain places. I've never had a seasonal campsite. So I understand a number of you have, and you know how they operate and what you feel is like, oh, that person's going way too many times. What are they thinking? Do you have a sense of how many times is too many?
You know, like I said, I personally, and there again, I don't like using my experience all the time as a personal, but me personally, I wouldn't move my camper. It's parked there for the season. That's where I like. Some people, for example, go to Loudon for once or twice for the races. They bring it down. It stays there for a week. They go for the race. They bring it back in a week and a half. You know, there's different options that are there. I just think as far as if you're looking at it from an affirmative side, that there should be something to designate what is going to be allowable and what's not going to be allowable. And I think if you were to mark that, you know, once for a campsite, or once for one, I don't want to use the word tenant because I don't think the tenant is the word we want to use, but that the seasonal camper can be moved out and brought back once during the season.
Yep.
That's I feel comfortable with the once. Like I said, I think if you go twice, 3 times, 4 times, you're opening that window. Now, is this classified as a seasonal, like Tracy said? Or is it somebody that paid a seasonal fee and, gee, I'm going to go to Old Orchard this week, in 2 weeks I'm going to go to Bailey's, and
But every weekend
then I'm going to
I'm
go
gonna
over
be in
here,
Claremont.
and then I'm going to bring it back for a month, and then I'm going to go there and over to here. And, you know, it's probably not a reality of it happening, but there's always that case that somebody could.
Once? Twice?
I think
3
Once.
times?
I think once.
Sorry.
Ladies, once, twice.
I was
think
just reading the
once.
application to see if it had been, you know, really,
I don't think
Yeah, I read through the rental agreement, and I don't really see anything that limits how many times something can be moved in or out. It just kind of states what the season dates are, or ranges are. I don't know a good number. I've never camped before, so I'm going to defer to you guys on that. But I do think there should be something in there that limits it to a certain amount.
yes.
Having been a seasonal camper, I agree with you. There's no way I would want to move it.
I think
However-
that gives your true seasonal camper versus somebody that has the intent of
Right, but
something, you know.
So, in order not to be so restrictive, to say that you cannot move it, I mean, I think that allowing them to move it off and then back once during the season is more than enough. For instance, they decide to go on a 2-week vacation up to Maine or something, move their camper up there so their family can enjoy that, but then move it back because during the racing season, they want to be there in the summer. I think once is a good number.
I think also I'd like to make the comment that the applicant has been very clear on what his intentions are as seasonal, as far as the management of a seasonal campground is what he's looking for. So
And and we can only hope that the management would run that, you know, and there again, we don't know 10 years from today what the management's going to be.
right.
You know, it could be somebody different and they interpret that
But,
a little
but
bit different.
if this is approved, it doesn't matter who the owners are 10 years from now.
It stays with the.
It
If it
stays
stays,
with
right.
the property.
And this is what I'm looking at is, you know, the present applicant is saying this, the next owner may interpret it different and want to. That's why I'm saying I think there should be that one You know, there should be a number, 1, 2, if that's what you want. Is that a bee by chance, or is that a fly?
This looks like a big fly.
Okay. Just want to make sure if it's a bee, someone's allergic to them, they're aware there's one flying around.
Moth.
So I think I'm happy with 1. Is everybody else? Okay, Mike. I think that there's a one-time, to add that, you know, there'd be a one-time possibility to pull off and come back.
Okay.
That's a number 7.
So, RVs and camper units maybe,
RV units they may be removed at one time per season only. God bless them for doing it.
Yeah, it's a lot of work.
Actually, I didn't turn my phone off.
Okay. So here is the amended. RVs and camper units may be removed from the campground one time per season for which they have a campsite permit. Any campground activity that appears in the opinion of Planning and Development Department to be contrary to the application materials, amended material, and or testimony? Or testimony?
And/or.
You want that and or? Okay. Testimony by the applicant shall be in violation of this variance. Ongoing violations shall be grounds to void this variance. Move on to number 8. The city shall be given access to inspect the campground for compliance with applicable permits and the Claremont City Code.
Does that mean that anytime you can go in? Anytime there's a complaint, anytime? Is that what that?
Right.
Okay.
Right. So in practice, that would be off the owner. We're looking to access the campground for this reason. But I thought, for simplicity's sake, that was probably the most direct way of saying it. Also, there are maintenance clauses. There's public safety issues. So I think this helps with those different aspects. 9, this variance is void if the approved use is abandoned for 12 consecutive months. And the term abandonment is an interpretation of staff right now. So let's say this is an extreme example, and this has happened before with other properties. There was a vet clinic that was for sale for a long, long time, but it was on the market as a vet clinic. It never really sold, but it was on the market as such. We saw that as the intent to maintain the use. So in this case, if there's an intent to maintain the use and it's maintained rather than just straight abandonment and no real statement or clear intent, that's where we hit that borderline of abandonment. And then the variance shall be recorded in the chain of title. And that's the last condition. Any gaps or concerns you may have about other conditions you feel are necessary?
You answered my question that I had in the municipal water supply. I thought when you said that the content meant that it was in the campground, you know, the whole, so I was okay with that, the way you said it, so.
And planning board side will cover all DES erosion, all that's addressed there, correct?
Site plan, well, yes, that actually so any state permits, we can't by state law dictate having those permits ahead of any approvals. That's almost, we see that as in tandem. We can condition approval upon receipt of certain permits.
Which is
I expect
that's-
this project to at least have site-specific permit, as well as the wastewater, on-site wastewater permits. And, you know, DPW will work with them on any other requirements for the drinking water supply or the water supply side of things. Since they're tapping in, you know, it's a fairly, it's almost a community use if you think of it as a well. I'm not up on the water regs if it's tapped into municipal service. But, yeah, it'll meet muster as a water supply.
Anybody else have any concerns with the fencing? I know that's probably harping on something we've talked about way too much, but the fencing. And I know that's kind of more planning board as well, but I was just more concerned with the safety aspect of making sure that the campground is kind of enclosed, whereas I think there was fencing along the back and maybe around like one side, but it didn't all kind of contain the campground.
I think there was 2 breaks in the fence that
Yeah.
I read. One was going to be to the Conservation Commission side, and give me a minute here to find it. It was actually stated with the blue, the red, and the yellow, all the lines. I remember
Yeah,
reading
I
it here
can't find
somewhere.
that one. I just wanted to clarify if you guys.
There was, I think that falls under the testimony, what they were saying, the testimony of the application. Give me a second here. Just-
I would agree that there is the fencing is an important aspect of the site. I don't know if it's necessarily part of this approval. I think if you want to state a clear intent for the planning board that the fencing needs to, say, meet a certain purpose, that would be a reasonable condition. Where specifically the fencing's placed, I would put that more to the planning board.
Okay, because I was just more concerned with, I know there was people who were giving feedback
Yeah,
that,
that's what I want.
you know, can somebody just wander and walk along into my property, which I would understand I would be concerned about as well, so, that's why I wasn't really sure if that's something that we can necessarily say, or if that's to them.
And I recall that the fencing, the intent of the fencing was, among other things, safety, but also preventing trespass, one way or the other. But it's certainly something, if there's, like I said, certain purpose of the fencing that you feel is important to this variance,
We need to include
that
it.
would be a condition.
Yep.
But you know, so from my observations, and I think I mentioned this in the memo, there was in testimony statements that campers would not be necessarily restricted to just the campground, that, you know, there is going to be access. I think actually in this document, the campsite agreement, that you know, campers would be allowed access. They, you know, for example, when it's talking about pets, when they're walking the Speedway property, they need to have their pet on a leash. So there's this sort of inherent understanding that folks aren't going to be confined to just the campsite portion of the property.
It's right
There
here.
will be points of access.
In the minutes, it states that there was a designated map showing the fencing. There were breaks in the fence on the east side, conventional land, and on the west where the gravel pit is. Those are the only 2 openings in the fence that were going to be separating the speedway, the speedway, the proposed campground, the whole boundaries of the property is the way I'm taking
Yeah,
that
that
there.
still
And-
concerns me though.
And like I said, if I guess the thing is, if you know that's part of the testimony, they are putting the fence up, and I would say that falls under.
But I mean, having been there, I can imagine as a kid, because I used to play in a gravel pit, that would be a fun place for me to go, and that is down towards other people's property, and it's not that far of a distance to walk off to someone else's property. So my concern is not maybe so much confining everybody into just the campground area, but there needs to be some confinement into the property itself so that people aren't wandering off into other people's property.
And there, I don't have the map of the fence
Yeah.
plan from
So it's,
before, but if I recall in the presentation, July, when they did the slide presentation,
Yeah, that would.
there was fencing all around.
I think that was updated so that it
I
wasn't.
do believe they changed in the
Yeah.
front on Thrasher Road side and to the westerly side, the type of fencing along the road and the old access, which was the old
Yeah.
access into the pit area. That section there, I think they changed the fence if I'm not mistaken, but the original.
That's where my confusion was, because I think on the original, everything looked great, and then I think there are now breaks in the fencing, and that's where my confusion was. I wasn't sure if maybe it's just, I didn't read
And
it
like I said,
right.
I'm not sure why
Yeah.
the breaks, I weren't here to understand that, so.
and the presentation that you're talking about,
That
there is
one.
a slide that indicates there are gate access
I don't
points.
have that one either.
That's like from one of the first ones.
It's the last one.
And then
Yeah.
Got that one.
it talks about the 6-foot racetrack enclosure fence.
Thank you.
Talks about the 6-foot deer safety fence essentially around the southern and southeasterly side of the property. It's a fine line. Obviously, there's the intent of fencing, and then we think of the Berlin Wall, right? People tried to cross that thing every year, and that was one of the most heavily fortified fences in history.
It's a little different.
But I'm taking an extreme as an example, that people still cross that fence line to their threat to life and limb.
Escape persecution, so I think it's a little different.
Well, right, understood. So anyway,
I mean, you can add it, Abigail.
Well, and I mean, that's why I'm bringing it to everybody. I don't know if anybody feels strongly about it or not. I just wanted some clarification and to get your guys' thoughts on it as well.
I don't know what was changed the full thing that was changed last month because it doesn't specify what from what we looked at back in July
Yeah.
to last month. My understanding that was presented was the property was fully fenced in with some form of fence, the full property. Then you had a fence separating the proposed campground from the existing racetrack. And the front of the existing racetrack was going to have some new fencing, and if I remember correctly, Mr. Ford said that the style of fencing they wanted wasn't going to suit what they were doing, that they should do something different. If I remember the conversation at that meeting correctly, but there was fencing along the Thrasher Road side that was going to be of a solid soundproofing type fence, whereas the deer fence went up along the backside to Main Street, back around the conservation side, back to Thrasher Road. Now, as far as breaks, if there's breaks for wildlife to get through, I don't know if that's what they mean. Like I said, I wasn't here when they proposed last month with the fencing changes that are listed. I'm under the assumption that the full project was fenced. That's my assumption by the application with the testimony that was given to us.
If that's what you want, Abigail,
I mean, if you want to add
it-
something to
yeah,
specify
add
a
it.
certain amount of fencing, please do it now. That would be, number 11 at this point you'd want to add.
And that's why I'm bringing it up. I don't really know what wording should be used.
Go
Look at me
for it. Just,
You're the wordsmith.
so I guess I'm sort of walking a fine line here because I am trying to just sort of convey existing information that was presented. And I would encourage you to look for the intent. So what do you
Well, that's what I'm
wish-
saying. Fencing
what
should
do you-
provide safety to the campers and to the abutters.
Right. So because that's somewhat different from requiring contiguous
Yeah.
fencing around the property.
But it's not contiguous around the property, it's around the campground to keep the campers from going to the abutters property, right?
It could be I'm not specifying to the campground, because I think, as you said, it is kind of open so that they can walk their dogs and whatnot. I think the real purpose is to keep the campers inside the entire property and keep the abutters
Right.
outside and so on and so forth.
And
So
I
does
don't
it-
think if you say a fence, it's going to mean that the campers can't get out to walk their dogs or whatever. I think that a fence restricts people from going to the abutting properties other than through a designated opening, which would be a gate or something that they could walk their dogs through or get to the racetrack through or whatever. I think what you're saying is, and I'm thinking figuratively, because that's how I think, you're talking about like the sides and the back. You want one big fence to keep little kids from wandering onto the abutting property and stuff.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so.
I know we can't say that. I know we have to infer what our purpose is so that the planning board can decide what that means.
Well, and here's the other side of it is, does it need to be a physical fence, or could it be something that's part of the permit? Thou shalt not go on, trespass onto other people's property.
Maybe it's posted signs, I don't know. I just think there needs to be something to provide
Clearly
the
communicate,
safe.
yeah. Let's see, so,
He's wordsmithing now.
I would say just out of practicality, because there may be points that are functionally impractical to fence.
Yeah.
That somebody help me with, the owner shall through physical fencing or the campsite permit restrict camper access to designated areas on the property and prevent trespass onto adjacent properties.
Sounds good to me. Did you write it down?
Can you
I
repeat
have
it?
no idea what I just said.
Can you please repeat it?
So does that concept sound
Yeah.
all right? So, and if somebody could help write this down while I'm saying it.
I got
So the owner shall, through physical fencing or amendment to the campsite permit agreement,
You just said permit
amendment
before.
to,
Campground agreement.
that's right, the campground agreement, restrict access to areas on the property.
Isn't that what the deer fence is going to
And
do, though?
prevent trespass on neighboring properties.
Wasn't the deer fence?
Deer fence is partly for that, but it's
it's
not going to be a continuous thing, and we know from testimony that the
Yeah.
deer fence that exists now has holes in it. So if the campsite manager witnesses people going onto
Right.
another property to collect firewood, they say, you got to stop that. This is your warning. They see him again, okay, you're out. That would be the intent of putting it in the campsite permit.
Do you want me to read it back to you?
I had something
Sorry, my
else.
handwriting's terrible.
It just escaped me.
Have we reached an end now?
Do you folks, do you guys have an idea? Do you want to try to read it back to me now?
Oh, what you just wrote? I wrote
What I
it
just
down.
said, I was asking for you guys to sort of,
Oh.
You want us to read it back
as
to
I was talking, yeah.
The owner, through physical fencing or amendment to the campground agreement, shall restrict access to adjacent properties to areas on the property and prevent trespass on abutting properties.
So that middle part, restrict to areas, access to areas on the property, that may not be as important. I mean,
No.
there's gonna be certain things that folks can't just wander into the pits, let's say.
Right.
That goes without saying. I don't know if that's really the intent of this
Somebody's gonna say
condition. And that's can be, that internal sort of circulation can be modified at planning board.
Okay.
Okay.
You got that one where you want it? I got one more.
Bring it
I
up.
keep, I get sidetracked and forget my train of thought. I had to write it down this time. I know it was stated in the presentation. I know that a lot of the abutters brought it up, that no racetrack equipment, parts, components, pieces, anything race related other than maybe a flag at your camper. You know, no physical race car components are to be allowed on the
In the-
campground side of the,
Okay.
meaning nobody can bring their race car tires back up because it was Saturday morning, they didn't want to take them home Friday night. Which I think the applicant has stated that that wasn't their intent to have, and I believe it
Right.
got changed in their
It did,
their agreement that it was, but I think if we're gonna go to the fact of making sure on the fence, and we're gonna make sure that any materials from the racetrack don't appear in the campground. And that'd be item 12. Anything else that
I
we
think
missed that I think we
probably
should?
needs to be read back to me, so.
Which one, Carolyn?
Number 12,
Number 12?
yep.
Want me to read
That
it to
there
you?
would be, Mike, you writing that down or you're?
there shall be,
I wrote it down.
what, okay, go ahead.
No racetrack, there shall be no racetrack components, i.e. parts, cars, equipment, kept on the campground site.
Racetrack, race car,
Yes.
race car?
Racetrack related, race
Said
car.
racetrack components is what he said, and then I put i.e. parts, cars, equipment
Okay,
shall be kept on the campground site.
Shall not be kept on.
No,
No,
there
right,
shall be no
shall not
racetrack
be.
related components, i.e.
Yeah, take
Cars.
shorthand.
parts,
no racetrack
equipment,
components, i.e. parts, cars, equipment.
stored at any campsite.
I would go
But
to the
they-
point, I would go to the point in the campground,
Stored in the
in
campground,
the campground area.
in the campground, okay.
Just if there's an overflow, let's say there's an overflow parking, which every campground has, I don't happen to
In.
It's not really,
pick out any
Designated in
place
the
that would be
plan.
considered as overflow here, but there again, if somebody had, brought their boat camping, they'd park their boat somewhere other than the campsite. Well, you can't park your race car in your race trailer in that said
okay.
spot. That's what I'm getting at. The anything related to
Racing.
the racing side of the property,
Stays,
Wednesday nights, Friday nights, whatever nights they do it, it does not go into,
what goes to
Said
racing
side.
stays in racing.
there you go.
Is that too restrictive? And the only reason I ask is if on the off chance someone has a seasonal campground who's also racing there and they have their helmet or something, is that considered equipment? Can they not have that in their camper?
What?
Mm,
I didn't hear your question.
Helmet or race suit considered?
I'm just.
I guess I wouldn't have thought of it in that depth.
Well, and that's what I'm
I
saying.
would say
I-
that makes
Yeah,
logical sense because I mean, I'm more to the car.
Yeah, and that part I'm
Car-related,
totally
the
with.
trailer,
Yeah.
jack stands, physical hard components. I guess a helmet or a race suit or a pair of racing shoes. You know,
That's their clothing.
that's a clothing. I don't consider that
Okay.
myself. That's my personal opinion. I
Well,
don't,
and that's why I asked.
yeah, no, that's a valid point. I guess at that point, it's telling you what kind of shirt you can wear to work and what shirt you can wear home.
Yeah, I think that
I think
enters into
that's-
reasonable enforcement.
Okay. Just want to make sure.
Yeah, I think we have a good understanding of intent with the examples that are given.
Okay.
Okay.
You know, I guess we could say they are not including.
I think it's fine. I just
That's
wanted, I
getting
just wanted to
accessories.
discuss amongst
I
ourselves.
know,
that
it gets-
we didn't
gets really
think letter
into-
of the law kind of
Yeah.
versus meaning.
This
of
isn't
it.
the medical profession, no.
All right.
Anything else?
Nope.
Carolyn, you're deep in thought. Anything else?
Oh, I sure am. No. I think we've had good discussion.
Tracy?
Nope.
Okay, with that being said and gone over for us,
You want to do a dry run of walking through the different five criteria and what you'll be looking at? Or do you want to go as you work through?
If we make a motion, either way, we still have to go through the 5 criteria, right?
I would say so.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, and I would ask that there be, that each criteria be voted on individually, just to be
Absolutely.
clear.
Absolutely. And just to clarify, if anyone votes
No.
no on any of the criteria,
fails.
No.
It's
It
all,
fails.
it's all a no vote
Yeah.
for every
All right.
one of them.
It's all yay or all nay.
all right.
You can't, out of the 5, you can't have one be different. It has to be all 5 affirmative.
And
or it
if one
fails.
person votes no, then it's a no.
No,
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 it's
no.
a no for
Vote
that
only.
person.
for that, so by,
So if you vote no on item 1, Carolyn votes no on item 2, Abigail's number 3, I'm number 4, and he's number 5, it fails. Because we all have a no.
But if we're
No,
looking
I-
at number 1 and 4 of them vote yes and I vote no,
I would say that one passes.
That one
That one
passes.
passes.
Okay.
So at each individual vote, on each individual criterion, it's a majority vote passes.
But so Tracy's eliminated out theoretically of the vote because she voted no on one of the 5 criteria.
Yeah,
It's
don't
not
get to
per
vote on all
person.
5?
If you vote negative on any one of the 5 criteria,
I'm a no vote.
you're a no vote at the end.
Right.
So you either have to vote yes to the positive on all 5 criteria. If you do not, your vote automatically goes against.
Okay.
If the motion's to approve and you vote negative on one, you're a negative against it. You either have to have all 5 as a positive or your vote doesn't count as a positive.
Okay, so now I have another question. Mike?
Yes.
If the motion is to pass the variance, and then we go to the 5 criteria, and the 5 criteria, one of them gets a no vote, then it doesn't matter that the motion was to pass the variance fails?
You know, I'm going to be absolutely honest with you. We've usually done this in a different approach, and I want to be absolutely clear how this goes. And I need to reference this. So if you give me a minute, I just want to make sure I'm clear in my head.
Would you like
On
5
this.
minutes? First, take a 5-minute recess so you can.
I would like to, because I'd like to get it right rather than
I'll make a.
what my
motion, we take a
recollection is.
recess.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Opposed?
Okay.
All in favor? Aye.
Anybody need to use the facilities?
For some reason, I just wanted to be absolutely sure in my head what you're talking about, so procedurally we were correct. So I'm going to speak back to you, my understanding, just so that we're clear and so the public's clear. So, that's right. So there are 5 criteria. Each criteria will have a majority vote, right? And so criterion 1 could pass 4-1, criterion 2 could pass 3-2, criterion 3 could pass, on and down, and they could each pass. But since those criterion are being voted on, then at the end, the vote for the variance. So let's say, Richard voted no on 1, you voted no on 2, 3, and 4, that kind of thing. It would still pass because there's still a majority in favor.
But they have to be positive on all 5.
That's right.
So any negative vote
Carries the
on
whole.
any one counts you as a negative vote on the whole
final vote.
application.
That's right.
So
On
as
the
soon
whole
as 3 people vote negative on any one thing, at that point, it automatically fails. So if you make it
Yeah.
to criteria 1, you have 3 negatives on criteria 1, the motion fails.
Right.
Right. And I think it still would be good for the record, even if we hit that that barrier on criteria 1 to go through criterion 2 through 5.
And even if criteria 1 through 4 passes, say 4, 1, 3, 2, whatever, you get to the last one, the hardship, and that one fails, then the whole motion fails
As long as you have 3 negatives
So let's
on
just say.
any one.
on
And what
anything.
I'd like to do is go through the exercise for the vote for each criterion, and we'll keep track of it. Even if, say, on the outside chance, criterion 1 fails, I still would like to go through criterion
Okay.
2
Okay.
through 5.
Let's go.
Okay?
So that when we specify, the reasons for the variance,
So,
it doesn't meet this, this, and this.
so this is like a dry run, and then we're going to actually do it and give our specific reasons?
Can we just do
I don't
it?
know, I think you just do it. I don't
Why
think you
can't
need
we
to
do
drive it.
this?
Just do it and get it done
Get
with,
this, you know.
I think
Okay.
that the folks have been patient enough between the abutters and the applicant. I think it's cut and dry. I mean, you either vote yes or no.
Right.
If you vote no, you're eliminated. Case in point, whether it's 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. If you have, and if you did your general worksheet and you have a no and 4 no's and 1 yes, or you have 4 yeses and 1 no, it's gonna fail
Okay.
for you. Long as 3 other people have 1 no, the motion will fail.
Right.
If you make a motion to accept or you make a motion to deny, it follows the same suit.
Right.
You either need, if you make a motion to deny this variance, and
So
you
we're going to
vote
go through the criteria now, and then we
as a
can make the
positive,
motion.
You're gonna make a motion to the positive, because that's usually the way Jane likes to do it. And then if you fail something on the positive, your part of the motion fails. Does that make sense? So theoretically, if I'm playing this by the way we used to do it, you make a motion to grant the variance, and then you do your 5 criteria. And on the 5 criteria, if you say no, you're a negative at the end.
But I think the motion would be so let's say we take the affirmative
To the
approach.
affirmative.
Move to approve the variance, and then you work through, discuss the first criteria, vote on the first criteria.
Exactly.
We'll do a roll call.
Okay.
Boy, Jane's gonna love you for that one.
In this case, I think we should.
No.
Yep.
I'm a little frustrated about this whole thing right now. I want to say
Yeah,
that.
it's a change in process.
Okay.
Do you wanna wait and get
Nope.
legal input?
No.
Okay, good. Let's proceed. Do I have a motion?
Go ahead, Abby.
For purposes of discussion, I move that we approve the variance from section 22166, permitted uses in the RR zoning district to allow a seasonal campground as a second principal use. We don't have to do any of
With the attached 12 conditions.
Yeah.
with the, okay, so we add.
'Cause those have been read into the
With the attached
record.
12 conditions.
As discussed, yeah.
As discussed.
I'll second. Question 1. Grant the variance would be contrary to public interest. And
I'm going to vote no. I think that this is a second non-conforming use on a lot that already has an existing non-conforming use. And I don't think that I think that it is contrary to the public interest.
Carolyn?
So,
Tracy's a
so
no.
just to be clear, so would granting the variance be in accord with the public interest? That's a no. Is it, or, and,
Correct. Carolyn would be yes, or
Um,
would be
I'm a no because of the significant, it's a significant new use already to a major, long, standing, non-conforming use.
Abigail?
I have a hard time with this one because does the variance conflict with the zoning ordinance in a way that violates its basic objectives? Does it alter the essential character of the neighborhood or threaten the health, safety, or general welfare of the public? I think it is trying to be a lower impact on the community possible. I think they've addressed some health and safety concerns that were brought up. I don't think it's necessarily negative in the general welfare of the public, personally.
So you
So
would
we
be
can count that
yes.
as a yes.
Yeah.
Richard?
Yes.
I'm going to go as a yes, Grant, and I agree with what Abigail has said as far as the impact as an overall, what could, or the safety factors have been well addressed with the applicant. I think there's enough concern that the abutters, that with what their concerns are, they have been addressed by us. They'll be addressed at the next level in a stricter form than what we've done.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I'd like to change my vote to yes. After careful thought of what Abigail has just brought to view, I would agree. It's been long and hard, a long road that they've proved to us repeatedly that they're looking for the welfare and safety. So I'd like to change my vote to a yes vote.
Yes, understood.
The spirit of the ordinance would the spirit of the ordinance would be observed.
I'm again going to vote no because I don't think that the spirit of the ordinance is being observed because it's a non-conforming use. Not only do they have one non-conforming use, which is grandfathered and long-standing, now we're adding a second non-conforming use in the middle of a rural residential area. And I don't think that that is in the spirit of the ordinance. We have zoning areas and the specific things that are allowed and not allowed, and not only on this one particular lot that we're looking at, they have a non-conforming, but now we're adding a second non-conforming, and this second non-conforming isn't just a little thing, it's, you know, it's a major campground with 189 sites. 149 sites. It's,
Just want to make sure the correction.
right, but it's a major campground, and I think that somewhere I read in the application, and I've really read and reread and read fourth and fifth times everything that we've been given. And one of the things that stuck out in my mind was at the beginning of this whole process, they said that they thought that the campground would help the racetrack, you know, being able to have the campers there and everything. And I just think that if the racetrack were to not succeed, and I hope that it does, but if it were to not succeed, then that non-conforming use would be gone, but you'd already had granted a campground, so now you still have a non-conforming use on that lot. And so I'm voting no on this. It's not in the spirit of the zoning ordinance, what we have the ordinances for.
Carolyn?
Well, because I stated the non-conforming use before, I would have to vote no on the spirit of the ordinance.
Abigail?
So, I actually also want to just take a moment to thank you for these kind of breakdowns that you put in here. This actually really helped me to kind of look at it in a different way. So, in looking at this, I'm thinking, for the spirit, we want to look at the broader implications of the variance application and context of the overall zoning ordinance and zoning map. Is the proposed use outlined in this application appropriate for the zoning district? Are there specific statements or provisions in the zoning ordinance that prevent the proposed use or the scale of these uses? And I reread the RR district today to make sure that I kind of understood what the spirit of that ordinance was, or try to ascertain what the spirit of that ordinance, since there is no spirit.
Without a purpose statement.
Yeah, without a purpose statement. And there really is a lot of things that are permitted in that area that I was kind of, I mean, I know it had been mentioned before, but it was also surprising to reread it about what else is kind of permitted there and how, in the grand scheme of things, I don't feel like this is all that out of skew of that spirit. Although I was going back and forth a little bit on the number of sites versus, you know, a vet or a hospital or something like that. While you may have a number of spaces within one building, it's not quite the same. But in the grand scheme of things, I didn't think it was all that outside the spirit of the ordinance for this use.
She's a yes vote.
Richard?
Yes. So you think that the variance is consistent with the spirit? Or-
That's yes.
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 I agree with that.
And I'm going to kind of rehash what Abigail just said. If you look at other uses that could go in here, the magnitude and size, I think, is the opportunity for something bigger is there. I mean, yes, this, like Tracy stated, this is a big camp. It's a big project. It's not a small project. You know, the size of the property itself is kind of a odd character if you're planning to do something in the city. You know, something of this size, you need the acreage. There really isn't the acreage. You know, the spirit of the ordinance, in my opinion, is what's good for the community along with the said district. I wouldn't classify this as a high impact compared to something else that could go there in the RR district. And for that fact, I'm going to say yes. Would granting the variance do substantial justice? I'll get them in order. Tracy?
To me, would the loss to the applicant outweigh the benefit to the public if such a variance were denied? And one of the things we can't consider is financial. And so, again, I'm going to be a no vote. I think that with all of the abutters that we've seen come forward on this application and listening to all the testimony, I think granting the variance would not do substantial justice to grant it, so I'm going to vote no.
Carolyn?
My vote is yes on this. I think that it has, they have done their homework on everything that we've put out to them for the public issues. So my vote would be yes for substantial justice.
I too would vote yes. I think, in looking at this, when I'm thinking about substantial justice, I'm thinking about bigger picture than just the abutters. I think there were a good amount of abutters here who brought very valid concerns. I think most of those concerns were addressed or tried to be addressed. And I think when I'm thinking substantial justice, I'm thinking about the city, all of its citizens, the tax base that this will add. And I think in that way it does do substantial justice.
There again, I'm going to say yes, and my train of thought is very similar to yours as far as the application, the review process, the willingness of them to accommodate the abutters. I think the bigger picture of the whole thing for the community is addressed. It's not the gain of the applicant. The general loss to the public, I don't think, is just to 20 abutters, 15 abutters, ever how many there were. The loss to the public is the community, more so. Oh, I'm sorry, I got out of order. Richard,
Yes.
and your input, sir?
Yes.
I think they did their homework on it. I think they did well for us, so I agree.
For following reasons, the values of surrounding properties would or would not be diminished.
Why do you always do
Because we started that and it go this way.
This one was hard because we had the applicant who brought forth a realtor, and she said, nope, it's not going to affect the values at all. And then we had an abutter brought forth another realtor, and he said yes, that it would. So it's really, I mean, who you bring forward. But I did learn that there's a subdivision up across from the racetrack. And it's had several lots there that none of them have sold. And it makes me question why someone hasn't, bought a nice lot. You're looking for a nice lot that's a quiet neighborhood except for the racetrack. And then I just think if you have a campground across the street, that's probably going to make those lots even more unattractive. So I'm going to be consistent here and vote no, that I think that if we put the racetrack in there, it would diminish the values of the properties in that area.
Excuse me. You're not putting a racetrack in.
I mean, a campground.
Good, I'm separate.
You already have the racetrack.
We already got the racetrack, so yeah, Just for the record, just to make sure that I's are dotted and T's are crossed.
Yes.
Carolyn?
I don't believe the values of the properties of the surrounding areas will be diminished. I think they're going to, the owners, the applicant is going to do everything in their power to make that whole thing aesthetically acceptable. He has to put a lot of investment there, and I would think that the values would maintain and may even increase. That's my feeling.
So I would also agree that I don't think they'd be diminished. I mean, value judgment is subjective no matter what, and stating here we should use our own personal experience and local knowledge to decide this point. And in the grand scheme of things, I think, although they are separate, the racetrack would have far more of a negative impact than I think a campground would, so I don't think it would make any additional damage than a racetrack already would. I don't think it would diminish it. I think if they go forward with the plan as it was presented to us with the aesthetics that they've put in, I think it's quite a beautiful looking campground, and hopefully it would help values.
Richard? Excuse me.
Yes, I think the values will, the value shouldn't go down at all. I think it should be fine.
We've had, there again, a pro from the applicant. We've had the negative from the other side. It's kind of hard to really, in my opinion, to say what real estate values do, because what it's worth today and what it's worth tomorrow can change, at the flash of a light. If you had the campground in there and the campground is done, in my view, is what's proposed, I think it's going, it is going to bring a little bit more of a traffic impact, but it's going to improve the community as a whole. And I'm not just saying Thrasher Road. I'm looking at the whole picture. I'm looking from the standpoint of the community, what it's going to do to the community. Unfortunately, you can't make everybody happy. We can't say that the abutters' views are the only views we got to look at here in the general public. Is this going to decrease values of the surrounding properties? I don't believe so.
Okay.
And there again, we don't have any baseline to go from. We don't have any history of such a case. This just isn't something that's there. We don't address something to this idea. Now the fun question.
Hardship, you could start at that end.
Unnecessary hardship.
There.
It's all
No, start at that
They
end.
can start wherever you guys want.
Well, I'll start. The unnecessary hardship. No. I don't foresee the hardship factor in this. I mean, if you read unnecessary hardship owing to conditions, and
There aren't any.
I don't know, is there, you go to Part B, it says the applicant demonstrated special conditions of the property that distinguish it from other properties in the area. Well, it is a large piece of property, but you're adding a second non-conforming use to an existing non-conforming use. You have subdivisions, which would be another potential use for the property, which isn't doing anything in the neighborhood. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. You got the two, you got one going against the other. I don't see where the special conditions for it that are there.
So just for clarification, when we look at criterion 5, it's either Part A or Part B.
Right.
Part B
Well,
is the rare incidence.
If you go as Part A, the
I mean, if we read, just to read through Part B for clarification, has the applicant demonstrated the special conditions of the property that distinguish it from other properties in the area, there's something there's preposition something.
There's some
prevent
missing.
reasonable use in strict conformance with the ordinance and variances necessary to enable reasonable use of the property. I think prevent, the idea of prevent reasonable use in strict conformance with the property, with the ordinance. That's in my mind, nothing can be done on the property because there's already a reasonable use on the property. In Part A, no fair or substantial relationship exists between the general public purposes of the sections from which relief is sought and specific application of the sections to the property. Again, you might look back to the first or second criteria as a point of reference for that. The applicant has demonstrated that proposed use is a reasonable one. So again, as we've talked about before, hardship is a weird term because it's not necessarily hardship anymore. I don't feel that hardship is the right descriptor for this criterion.
And that's the stumbling, I mean, the terminology. You know,
Yeah.
granted, the state has changed their view, but it hasn't changed in RSA. Their interpretation of what it is, and it makes it.
Well, it says, can I read this part? Under this part, there is an attempt to balance the public good resulting from the application of the ordinance against the potential harm to a private landowner. Basically, is that for Part A?
Part A.
But I don't think that there's a hardship in that this lot already has a use. He has a racetrack there, and it's been there, and so he's getting use. Yes, it's a huge lot, and the racetrack doesn't take up the whole lot, but that doesn't mean that we have to grant him a variance for the campground just because he wants a second use on that lot. He has a use on that lot, and I don't feel that he has a hardship. So I'm voting no on that one. I'm consistent.
And you didn't want to start with you.
No, Mike went first.
So I mean,
Made it feel better. Someone else.
does it help, Mike, if you discuss it a little bit further to process it, or are you still?
I always have a problem with this part of it, and my biggest problem is doing this as long as I have. The criteria of hardship has changed so much, and to wrap myself around what they classify as hardship today.
It's really evolved.
It's not what it used to be. Hardship was something back 20 years ago, even 15 years ago. It was cut and dry. It was either A or B, and that was it. You had no leeway to go one way or another. The way the law has changed over the years in reading this, has it demonstrated that it's a reasonable use? Yes. It has. We've demonstrated that the property in question is a reasonable use as a campground. But there's already one non-conforming use that is on the property. The applicant has demonstrated that no fair or substantial relationship exists between the general public, the general public purpose of this section of the ordinance from which relief is sought, and specific application of sections to the property.
So balancing the public good versus
It's
potential harm to private owner.
Exactly what it says.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that I guess if someone could give me something different, a different view to look at.
Well, I think that's what Mike did here. That's he said, this is, under this part, there's an attempt to balance the public good resulting from the application of the ordinance against the potential harm to the private landowner.
I don't think there's a potential harm to the landowner because he's already got a use of that land.
But
It's not he might want two
say
uses.
that again, please.
but-
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's written right here.
It's right on your.
Under this part, there's an attempt to balance the public good resulting from the application of the ordinance against the potential harm to a private landowner.
But what would be the harm
To the landowner.
to the landowner?
That's what we'd have to figure out.
And, well, no, that's what I'm
and
saying.
for-
I know what you're saying,
And this
but
is the only thing that I have a little bit of a hard time with too, as well, because I would lean towards no, but when I think about that parcel of land, if you're talking about subdivision, how would you do that? You have a steep hill down one side, you've got conservation land to the other, you have one road that comes through a parking area. How would you, in your mind, do that, where that would be a reasonable use for that property? You couldn't, there's no access to
well,
it.
I guess at that point, and this is the way I would look at it, if you were gonna do a subdivision, say on the property, at that point, one would assume the racetrack is gone. That you wouldn't do a subdivision as a second non-conforming use to the
The
racetrack.
subdivision
And I
wouldn't be a
get that,
You know, the
then-
subdivision wouldn't work under the topography of the existing property.
And along with that, I mean, this is the best alternative for the continued economic growth of that piece of property.
I think it's a great use. I just,
And-
I'm stuck on,
And it's the lower impact that I see of the use. And so that's how I'm reading that literal statement that I just read.
But we're not
One-
supposed to consider finance.
No, and that's true, but I'm looking at this as,
I'm
I'm
not
not-
talking about
Economic.
finance, I'm just thinking.
you're supposed to think of the racetrack
continuous
separately, so I'm
as
thinking
well.
the racetrack separately, I'm thinking just this parcel of land, what can we do with it? Which is, you couldn't divide it just as it is. You'd have to include the racetrack.
Mhm.
Whether that's good or bad, I don't like care what you think about that, but that's what I'm looking at it as, like, what could you do? And I'm not saying he absolutely needs to use all of his land, but is that a reason not to think about it?
and if I read, correct me if I'm wrong, we're talking less than 40% of the actual property being used? Is that what I read in the minutes? Is that correct?
60 of it's in the racetrack.
66 acres.
There's, out of the acreage that's there,
You mean for the campground use, or in
the
total?
whole lot size of the racetrack and proposed campground is only 40%, if I read the minutes correct, from last month. The number that was given on the extreme from, and excuse me if I butcher your name, Mr. Achita, is that correct? Did I say that right? Okay. His estimates was 35 to 40% was the higher side
Oh,
Correct.
was that in response to my question?
of the land usage. So out of 66 acres, we're only using 30 acres, 35 acres. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt and say half, 33 acres.
Yeah, a very rough estimate would be 35 to 40% just for the campground.
That's just the campground, Mike. That's not,
That's just the campground.
yes.
35 to 40, so
But that was his rough estimate for just
so
the
the
campground.
majority of the lot is being used for the racetrack.
Okay.
Yeah,
I mean, there are substantial vacant spaces on the property as the plans show.
yeah.
I still don't see the harm
Should be the-
to the landowner. I can't connect it. I'm
Let's keep voting so that we can get on.
Abby?
with this.
Well,
I
you can go
guess-
to,
Abigail, what?
Carolyn's
Um,
next.
Everybody want to be out here. Carolyn, what's,
Well, I thought, yes, I already gave you my
Okay.
reasons, so.
I'm gonna go with yes because I feel like it's saying it's in line with the first two, which is public interest and spirit. It's balancing the public good against the applicant. And overall, I think the public good resulting from the application of this ordinance.
It's on to you, Richard.
Richard said yeah. I'm still debating.
Gonna change your
It
vote?
doesn't matter if you change your vote or not, it's passes.
No, well, personally, it matters.
Well, no, we should do a tally.
No, it's still, technically, it still would pass either way that I vote.
No,
Um,
well, here's.
Yeah,
here's
it
the
will.
deal.
There's two
Carolyn voted
no's.
no.
No, Carolyn
No,
voted
didn't I?
yes.
No, on the first.
No, number
criteria-
2, you voted no.
Please. On the first criteria, you changed your mind. On the second criteria, you voted no.
Carol and Tracy, the only 2 no's.
That's right.
So
And
there's
you
2
would be the-
yeses, 2 no's,
You would
so
be the third no if you voted no
I
on this
gotcha.
one.
Gee, nothing like being put in the hot seat.
And it's a criteria on its own, so I don't think the weight of the decision needs to be considered here.
Well, like I said, looking at it from both sides, it's. I mean, looking at it the way it is, the balance, I'd have to say yes. But you know, the general public, the balance to the public, the general public. It's an income. I guess if I look at it to the last part of that criteria, I would have to say yes, because I'm going to go back to the economical good to the community.
Oh, yes. Okay.
I'm unsure. Where are you voting?
Yes.
Okay.
I like to say, I guess I have to go with my own feeling as a whole. I think the guidelines that we've started to set forth at this point is a good start for the planning board to proceed and fine tune everything else.
Okay.
With that, the ayes have it.
So should we take we've gone through the 5 criteria. Final vote as terms of the tallies.
It's 3-1. 3-2,
3-2.
sorry.
3-2. So Richard's yes across, Mike is yes across, Abigail's yes across. Carolyn is no on criteria 2, and Tracy is no across.
Everything.
So the motion passes. The application has been approved.
Now,
Do we need to
there's
go
a
through?
30-day window. for
Yeah,
appeal.
there's opportunity to appeal.
So there's a window for appeal of 30 days. Next step's planning board after that.
Well, the applicant could go to planning board whenever they're ready to. And it's up to them whether to wait out the 30 days or not.
No,
And the next step, this appeal would be a request for rehearing to the zoning board,
Right.
if there was an appeal to this decision, for any reason from any party.
we're clear on the conditions too, because I don't think
Yes.
when the motion was read in.
You said all
It was-
12.
At all
Oh,
12.
okay.
Yep.
Oh,
With-
as
with
read.
conditions as
Okay,
discussed,
as
yep.
read.
Yep.
All right. I want to make sure it's, okay.
Next item,
Thank you.
and I'm going to do it again. Farhan. How's that pronounced, Charlie?
You did.
Claremont, the applicant is seeking a variance from section 22-389 of the Claremont City Ordinance to convert an existing 2-family to a 3-family home, property located 154-156 North Street, tax map 107, lot 280, zoning district is a PR. This is continued from 9/12. And if I could ask you folks, please, to proceed quietly, thank you.
Thank you.
9/12/16 is continued from. Mike, do you have anything new to, I know we didn't get into it last time because I guess I put the squash to it at that point.
I do have, and I have handed out new information that was supplemental information provided by the applicant, along with some amount of general analysis. And let's see, there's a there's a memo dated September 29th. So what needed to happen was with this variance, there are standards for multifamily units and multifamily conversions, and there are minimums in the zoning ordinance. So with the plan and the floor plan information that the applicant provided, and this this information you should have received in your packets. It details the floor plan for each of the units. And the memo summarizes the approximate square footage for each of those units based on certain assumptions. And they meet the minimum standards for the zoning ordinance. The density with the 3 units, the lot is approximately 10,500 square feet. The density for each of those units for the entire lot is approximately 3,500. The zoning ordinance has a limit of 1 unit per 5,000. So that's the current, the maximum density is 1 unit per 5,000. He's asking for the variance to increase that density to 1 per 3,500, so about a 30% increase. Now, just in the context of how this would move forward, this is conditioned of a special use permit by this planning board because it's a duplex to multifamily conversion. There are going to be certain specific conditions for the site operation that will be reviewed under the special use permit provisions. So what we really want to sort of focus on is sort of how this fits on the site, whether the density is appropriate for the site, whether it meets the criteria for the site. Now, I know we sort of fumbled our way through the review of criteria for that last case, and I think that was important. We can talk about procedure and refining that procedure. But I would leave it up to you folks how you want to proceed with this case. It's a little less complicated in terms of reviewing the 5 criteria, but I leave it to you if you want to maintain that process that we just went through.
And before we proceed, I would like to ask the applicant again. I know I did last time. And I don't know if anybody else here, I happen to know the applicant. He owns some businesses in town that have occasionally been to. As another business owner, of course, you try to keep your business. Anybody have a problem with the fact of a being going into a stores? I'm sure everybody has, probably don't know they have. I happen to know the properties that he owns as retail stores that I've been in. I just want to make sure nobody has a problem and make sure the applicant doesn't have a problem with me sitting on the application.
I have no problem.
I'm fine with that.
Like I said, he has a couple retail stores, and I just want to make sure.
So you're saying you do business with him?
He owns 2 convenience stores.
So I think,
And I
So
guess
I'm
the
not
thing,
getting the relationship.
well, that's
Yeah,
I
no,
think
I'm
that's
fine.
what he wants
because
to
what I'm
clarify.
trying to say is that as him as a business owner,
Okay.
and me going into his store and associating with him as a business owner of the store, and me being another business owner, associating more than, hi, how you doing, have a nice day. I just want to make sure that there's no questions of conflict that anybody to verify.
Not under those circumstances.
Thank
I
you.
see no conflict.
That's all I wanted to make sure.
Okay.
I just don't want someone to come say, hey, you go to his store every other day and buy a gallon of milk and he's there. There's a conflict
Does
of
he
interest.
give you a discount for that milk?
Not yet.
All right.
And we're all going.
Okay. Do you have anything else, Mike? I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Shawnee, I guess.
I have a question.
Oh, sorry.
So, with all this stuff that you gave us,
Oh, sure.
I just kind of wanted to ask a question. I know obviously there were previous owners that I'm assuming he bought the property from, that there seems to have been a stop work order due to electrical and plumbing. Do we know if that stuff's been fixed or updated, or is that still a
That's-
problem?
All that's in abeyance. The final CO is on hold until this process goes through.
So in other
If
words,
this application fails, then it'd have to be reverted back to a duplex. Or it's just unoccupied space. There has been work done, and it was principally by the prior owner. So the current owner acquired the site, and this is just sort of demonstrate the process. I think there has been question in the past, how could this become an illegal situation? What have you guys been doing now at planning and development? We were tracking this for about a year and encouraging the prior owner to remediate the situation. What happened after that was that the prior owner sold to the applicant, and the applicant was aware that the third unit was illegal. He approached the office and said, I'd really like to make it legal. How do I do that? And so this is the process to make that third unit legal.
So there would, if this was approved, there'd be then steps to update everything to the code that it should be?
Correct.
Okay, just making sure.
so the prior owner received a cease and desist, continued with the work anyways, put the third unit in, sold the building to the applicant. The applicant knew that the third unit was illegal and bought the property anyways, and then when he bought it, tried to remedy the situation,
Is trying to.
is trying
This
to.
process.
Can we talk to the applicant? No,
Of course you
not
can. I'm going to step aside. Do you want to talk to the applicant? Because if you have any other questions.
I just, we haven't done the roll call, but there's nobody here, but just for
And a butters roll call.
abutters
Do you want to do that now?
I think it needs to go into the record.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Carolyn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your butters,
Oh, the last
Carl
time.
Martinson, NIMMA Holding LLC, Quellen Realty LLC, Michael Demars, BB Investments LLC.
Thank you, Mike.
And just for the record, Mike, I don't have that from this packet. It's last month.
It's from the last packet.
Okay. Shawnee, come up to the microphone, please.
Hi.
You're in the hot seat now.
Oh, yeah.
Hi. I remember that property when the LaCasas owned it, and that's like 4 or 5 people back. The building next door was North Street School, and I went to grade school there, so I remember that building and the property. When you bought the property knowing that the third unit was illegal, did you have any kind of conversation that led you to believe that you would just have to go through the paperwork and that it was no big deal that you'd be able to get? I mean, did you consider the fact if we didn't pass the variance, what you would do with that property?
All right. They started the whole deal back in December, almost a year ago. And that time, the prior owner, he started making a third unit. He applied for the variance and this and that. That time he tried to sell me, or I tried to buy it. Under that impression, this building has 3 units without knowing what's going on the back end with the city.
You didn't know that he had received
No.
a cease and desist order?
I did not know. Even still, there's a third meter, electric meter outside. Like, not meter, but the place used to be an electric meter there. So everything fine. I don't know what's going on. I applied to the bank. Everything goes fine. Bank send the, what they call the
Assessor.
assessor. They check and they go through in the detail, and they said no. They're having a problem with the city. There's no third unit involved. No back history. I came to the city, okay, what's going on? This is, my banks told me, and I want to do it. That time, I met Mike and the Nancy, and they told me this is the whole situation. I stopped the deal. I don't want to buy it. Back in March then. April, May, June. June, things clear, and he told me, okay, I applied for the variance. And now he gave me the copy, application copy. Still, I didn't know he paid the fee. He submit that application. I was under that impression, okay, he submit the application, fine. I went back bank and I said, okay, yeah, I'm gonna buy it now. That time I applied for my personal residence, and this time I was like, okay, what he doing is, so I don't want to live there, just do the investment. So everything fine, and changing the process, the bank approved 2 units, not 3 units, because everything documented is the 2 units. I know that, but application has been submitted by the prior owner. I was okay, I will continue that. I used the word to him, okay, I will transfer the application to me, and I will continue with the city to get the approval. I came back with the application and I know, okay, well, he never submitted the application for the variance. And that's how I submit the application and I said, yeah, here's a copy. And Mike checked the whole through, he never submitted the application. That's my story, and here I am now.
I mean, we're not supposed to grant variances. I mean, I feel bad that you got the runaround, and it seems like you're trying to cross your T's and dot your I's and do everything the right way. I wish there was some sort of recourse that the city could have against him for, putting the illegal unit in and then selling the building, letting people think that you.
It's in the process.
I have some questions based on this.
Yes, ma'am.
First of all, is there occupants in that 3rd unit right now?
No, my stuff is there. Nobody's
just-
living. Nobody's living.
Okay, nobody's living there.
Nobody's living.
The other 2 units are being occupied.
Yes.
And what is that 3rd unit, if passed for the variance? What is it supposed to, just a rental unit, or are you
Yes.
living there, or?
It's a 1-bedroom apartment. I mean, even I live or I rent it out, one way or another, something like. I haven't decided actually.
Now, have you gone about any legal action against the sale, the owner that you bought this from?
No,
Okay.
because the whole transaction, like I said, based on the 2 apartments
Through the bank?
through the
Okay.
I
bank.
bought it as a 2-family and
Right.
not a 3-family.
Right.
Okay.
Because he showed me and he gave me the copy of the application, and I took his words that city will approve what he or deny based on his application.
Okay. And
So-
you made mention that there were 3 electrical hookups?
Right. Prior owner mentioned me there was 3 electric meters. Okay, based on the 3 units. I see, still you can see there's a box outside and shows the signs of the 3rd meter too.
But the meter's not there?
Meter is not there.
Okay.
But as per the history, there never been 3-unit apartment that building.
Okay.
Probably one of them was for a hot water heater.
Yeah.
Could be. I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
That'd be the best educational guess I could make,
Right.
is that when the house was a single-family unit, is it demand meter they call it for? I think they call it a demand meter, which would be your hot water, which is a different socket box and meter than a regular household meter. Any other questions for the applicant?
Can I add
Yep.
something? The only thing which makes me feel that there was some separate unit, not the 3rd unit, or some separate, because the access, the entrance for that unit is a separate, independent. There used to be a door between the 1st floor and the 2nd, and between 2 units, and he closed that one. But the entrance he did not open. There was entrance before. So the separate entrance, I mean, I can imagine. I don't know. I never seen that building before, but I see the entrance before.
Which unit's the one we questioning? Unit number
The
3?
unit's on the second
the
floor,
side.
unit 3, right?
Unit 3 is the one
Unit
that's in
3.
question?
It's on the second floor.
Exactly, yes, this is the one.
It's, I'll tell you how I feel about this. There's enough questions for me that I'd like to see this continued, and I would like to have a site visit. That's how I feel.
I think we questioned that last meeting. Tracy, you weren't there. I think Abigail also questioned that, if I'm not mistaken, to possibly do a site visit to try to get a feel a little bit more for what it is to
I
see.
went down there already.
Well, no,
Trespass. I just.
we're to go in and see the
wanna go
unit
in the
layout
house.
and how things are. And I think I guess I'd like to see it because I have a different scenario in my mind than when I walked through the front door tonight. So, he's made the state that maybe, the one bedroom unit he might live in. Well, if it goes against what the spirit of the ordinance or what the zoning ordinance was set up to do. The PR zone now has changed. It used to be 10,000 per, it's now 5,000. We meet the two if it, and this is food for thought if we do go look, as an owner occupied.
Well, and I thought it was actually really helpful. I would just put it out there to get, I like the information you gave about the other houses in the area. That puts it into context a little bit better for me as well. Because when I look at that, there's 3 out of this list that are under 3,500, which is what he's looking for. And there are 2 that are just barely at the limit. And there's the other 2 that are above it. So it's kind of interesting to see that
There's lots of.
there are a lot of
in that area.
like variances in that area
Well,
already.
they're not variances.
Well, they would be if they were coming to us today.
And what had happened, just to give you some backsight,
Well, I know this is an area we're trying to, or
20 years
general,
ago,
people don't want to have as many.
right, there was an overabundance of dwellings per square. It was overbuilt with people for what the property was. Hence, the 10,000 square foot per living unit came into play. As of last year and a half ago?
2013.
Has it been that long? Wow. As of 2013, they changed it, that in a PR zone, they've dropped that requirement down to do the city center and the PR zone. City center, the MM, whatever they call downtown now for a zone. MU? To try to accommodate some of the use of these other buildings that don't meet anything else. I guess, Carolyn, if you'd like to make a motion, I would second it.
I'd like to make a motion to continue this application until we can formulate a site visit and review this at the next zoning board scheduled meeting.
November 7th. I'll second it.
Almost my birthday.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Okay, let's set up the visit. The site visit.
Well, how can we do that?
Why do you do this to me and I don't have a book?
Yeah, let's, what we can do, we've set a date certain for the,
Next meeting.
you can have that if you want. So yeah, we'll set up we'll need to set up and notice the site visit. That's no problem. It just has to be probably at least a week or 2 out from today to meet the proper notice requirements. We've continued it to a date certain for the hearing. So we can, by phone call, email doesn't quite work so well, but by phone call, arrange for a site visit date. Unless you folks have some idea of what days work better.
I would be a little sensitive for the property owner
Yeah.
notifying the other units,
Tenants.
the tenants.
You know,
So-
giving them a heads up.
You guys gonna do all 3 units? Was it?
Can we, is that,
Yes.
To get a good sense of the.
no, I'm just, is that legal if they're occupied? Can we demand that?
24 hours.
They just need a notice.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we're not overstepping what we can ask to do.
You want to go over right now? Is that what you?
Yes, right now.
Right now, call and tell them to get out of bed and open up the door.
Yeah, no, it's a,
Making sure.
Shotgun ready for us.
fair notice now.
So
So-
how are we resolving this?
We're
Can
gonna
we
do a
pick-
phone call with scheduling first of the town staff,
Okay.
where that falls, then with the board, and then they will notify Shawnee to notify the tenants what evening we're gonna stop by.
Okay. All right.
What, will it be like 5:30, 6 o'clock, or
So
you
it's
have,
got,
you don't get
here,
into
wait a minute,
town,
here's a
right?
problem though. When's daylight savings start?
November 11th, I think.
Okay, just because if you say 6 o'clock and it's daylight savings, it'll be dark.
Well, it's getting
I'm
there now.
not caring about that. I'm saying, what time do you get into town?
6-ish.
6, so it would have to be after 6-ish.
At 6-ish is fine.
At 6-ish.
6-ish.
is fine.
Ish.
A little
Now
this
make
way,
sure
a
you get
little that
the
way.
ish.
Or if that's not doable, I can always try to get off early.
We're
Could be a little later, a little
Ish.
earlier.
It's doable at
I
6-ish.
just think that we should,
We're
we should
still
talk
on
about
air.
the time so that he can tell his tenants the time, because I'd hate to be coming into
Getting
the
supper.
apartment when they're having supper and them not
Well, I
offering
think-
to let me stay.
I think at this point in time, though, we've got 2 weeks that staff
Right.
tomorrow can try to get a tentative date, get a hold of us, get a hold of the applicant. I don't think this is something that they're gonna, hey, by the way, tomorrow we're gonna come and check it out.
So for safety's sake, we'll shoot for the week of the 17th or the 24th.
Okay.
Because we've got to work around, well, that's a plan, no.
The 24th is a planning board week.
So the week of the 17th would probably be the week you'd want to do it.
Yeah.
That's what we, yeah.
Ideally, so sometime during the week of the 17th to the 21st. I'd prefer not on a Friday, because Friday's usually terrible for me.
Okay.
Let's
And
look at the
I already have a commitment on the 20th, so
The 17th is looking good.
Carolyn, how about you?
Hey, listen, I've got so many meetings scheduled right now, it doesn't matter, one more. Could care less.
So the city staff will contact you with a date that staff and the 5 of us can go down and fly through this in a timely manner, not waste your whole evening of looking at it. And then when we come back on the 7th of November, everybody will have a clear scenario of the settings and what,
Can I
where, and why.
ask one question though?
Why not?
Now, how's parking work for if you had the 3 units and it would be, how many bedrooms?
well,
So
I
he would
think,
need 9 parking spaces?
We already made a
no,
motion.
it's per unit. We need to keep that to the public hearing. We've
Okay.
closed the
No,
public
I
hearing.
was just
but-
wondering, because I saw 2 driveways, I was wondering if he had any
And that
additional.
could be a discussion at the property, where you could ask him to point out where the parking spaces would be. But I'd say it just sticking to protocol, let's,
I'll remember,
I'm,
sorry.
Don't ever be sorry.
Okay, with that being done, under new business, we have none. Under communications, do we have anything that you would like to add?
Nope.
Under other business, I have a couple points of interest.
You got a magazine here, Town,
Well, that can
Town
go
City magazine, yep, sorry.
Wait.
Our,
Under communication,
yes,
that email that was sent out about, why am I blinking?
The
New Hampshire
OEP conference?
MA?
Yeah.
NHMA conference, yes.
For those of us that are interested, is there any funds that will be available to us to subsidize any of that?
There is, it's usually submitted through the planning office. I don't know what the limits are, and honestly, when I looked on the NHMA registration website, it looks like I had to start registering before I got an
Yeah.
understanding of what the costs were.
I went in and that's exactly right.
Yeah, so I don't have a sense of what the costs are overall. There might be some budgetary limits to what can be reimbursed.
Obviously, yeah.
Yeah, so I think the expectation is, traditionally it's been maybe $50 for a one-day conference. This is much more substantial because it's overnight and 75th anniversary gala and all this stuff.
Maybe
So-
not all that is
I
needed.
think the overnight stay is on us.
Okay,
I think the gala is on us.
Yeah.
But I think our classes and everything are all paid for.
okay, and that's what.
That's
yeah.
what I'm understanding at city level. Could be wrong, but I think that's what we're acting on.
That makes sense to me. I just didn't want you to think that you guys could rent a limo, stay over.
No,
for the
not at all.
weekend,
You mean they're not gonna
reimbursed
pick
by
our
the
bar
city.
tab up?
No, but I
Come
think.
on.
I got a couple.
I don't know how it works here. I don't know if it's a reimbursement thing or we submit
I
it to
think it's
you
a
and you
reimbursement
pay
thing.
it.
But I
Typically
think
reimbursed.
Okay,
as a
awesome.
point of interest, I think we really have to get on it and decide which subjects
Classes.
where each one of us is going to take so that we can evolve and come back with combined information, because there's a lot to offer in those 2 days that we can all benefit from. And I didn't know if Richard was planning on going? No?
It's kind of hard for,
hard for us.
it's hard for people that work for themselves, to attend these. Unfortunately, they used to do these in the evening, and they used to do them by region. So the
Everybody
average,
could attend.
the average American who has to work for a living could go to them. Today, they think that everybody has Saturday and Sundays off, and everybody works from 9 to 5. Well, if that's the case, I'm doing something wrong.
Okay.
So that's the difficult part, and Jim Petron's the same way. He works for someone and he works for himself.
Because I know, as a point of order for this, Victor Bergeron is going down, he is staying overnight. Whether he'd be available to share a room if we had, like anybody else that wanted to go, I think that would be a good discussion. But we've
Yeah.
been talking amongst ourselves
No, but I
tonight.
do agree with you that it's tough because I have to take days off to be able to do this.
Right, and-
Whereas some people are retired and that
For
works a little
some-
better for these things.
People are supposed to be retired.
Okay. Under other business,
I think she just.
first item is our vice chair has brought me a letter of resignation. The city will have a letter hopefully by the end of the week from him. I told him I could not accept it and turn it in. It had to go to, he either had to mail it or bring it to the city planning department himself. So there will be a seat opening for the 2 alternates if you'd like to apply. There again, same thing like you applied for an alternate, you go before the city council, and if the both of you go, or there's 5 people that go for the seat, it's up to the council to appoint whoever. I will tell you, just because you're an alternate, don't plan on being appointed if there are other applicants, because that can backfire on you. They look at everybody in general, and they pick who they feel is the best to fill the seat. So hopefully that when they do it, they take all applicants. If there's more than 3, they fill the seat, and they fill, if one of you get appointed, your seat at the same time.
So with that, I'm going to ask the question, is this going to go out as an advertised position available?
I would expect so, yes.
It would have to.
Okay.
We have not received the resignation.
The resignation hasn't come in. Once the resignation
Okay.
comes in, and like I said, he has contacted me. He dropped it off to me, and I says that I could not take it from him. That he has to bring it to the city, and he's going to. Under B, I've been discussing with Mike now that he's full-time staff to, as a board, to set something up at the visitor center on an evening that there is no other conflicting agendas of Carolyn, for you, for other boards that you have to sit on, for Mike, other boards that he has to go to the meetings, and everybody involved, that we can maybe take an hour a month, 2 hours a month, sit down and, I guess, start from square one, work our way through in a workshop type atmosphere so that we're all up to date on terminology, technology, how everything is, and not so much go from just the legal standpoint, but from the procedural standpoint, that like what you used to do, Tracy, as an office, what Mike does in the office, how things work, what we would like to see, what they need us, so that we can get the ball rolling in a smoother form than we've had, where we haven't had somebody in Mike's position for a number of years. You know, you can tell him, and I don't know if you ever went into his office, but the poor guy, he used to come in on a Monday to a pile of papers like this, and
So you're looking for a projected schedule of, you know, maybe 3 months out, certain
topics.
training sessions and topics? Is that what's
training,
gonna happen?
well, training topics, going over general practice, going over things that we should know, that we may have forgotten, things that have changed.
And that's gonna be 1 hour?
1 hour, two, be whatever you want it to be.
Many weeks.
It's in as many weeks as we want to.
Okay.
Mike is willing to work with us, and I know that in the past, this has been something that you personally
Oh, yeah.
have been asking and
I am-
asking
I
and
am
asking and
adamant.
asking. And I don't want to overburden Mike and say, yeah, let's have a meeting and be 5 hours one night, and everybody walks out like, okay, what just happened?
No, after
Over
2
an hour
hours, you're
is
burnt.
long.
You know,
know?
so if we set a limit of, good, 2 hours, and this is what we're going to talk about in this 2 hours. Next meeting, we're going to talk about this. We're going to talk, and then we can come back with questions, concerns, if we need to. You know, good. That's going to be next time, because we got too many questions from this last meeting. That we come back in and good. It gives him time to necessarily get other information that we might be asking that he's not 100% sure on, which usually isn't the case. Usually he's pretty good on everything. You ask him a question and it's there. It's not something that, well, I got to go look. You know, the legal standpoint of it, that's Jane's side of it. I think we get a lot from her, but I think we're going to get more from Mike, so that we're all on the same page, rolling the same direction. And I think if he's willing to do it, and do it on a smaller and more often type atmosphere,
I think we would all be, it would all behoove us to have this training so that each of us can give detailed reasons for our answers, because it's so important for litigation purposes. And I think a prime example was tonight. You know, that's sometimes when it comes to really speaking those reasons, you know, I myself am one that I just, you know, it's hard for me to give detailed reasons, and I really need that retraining on a consistent basis, and I think that would be most
and I think the
beneficial.
understanding of, we all have been here long enough. The understanding of the spirit, or the different terminology that's used. The hardship terminology, like I
Hardship
said,
is one that we
has
stumble on.
changed so much. And unfortunately, what's printed for us to go by and what is accepted, and correct me if I'm wrong, are two different things. What's printed as an RSA right now and what's accepted are two different things. The courts, and it just hasn't been changed to come back to our level. Am I correct in saying that, Mike?
Well, it's sort of, it's written unwritten. I think the
transitional.
the legislature tries to keep up with
I think
the
it's
court.
changed so
And
much.
It all
I'm sure
boils
your
down to
gap of
interpretation.
Time
How
that
it's
you've
applied.
seen a big change.
Very big. When
You
you
know?
just said, you know, like Tracy's old position or Mike's, I'm thinking to myself, what I used to do and the rules and stuff, they are so different now.
And I think it's just a refresher. Being a refresher for everybody, it never hurts.
I agree.
Especially
Well, I'm for it
for-
100%.
Yeah,
Especially for
I am too.
Someone like myself. I still find myself stumbling on 20 years ago technology, rules of what we did 20 years ago. Like I said, the hardship rule. I have a difficult time because I've seen so many different versions of it. You're looking at, well, which one, how do I want to review, where do I want to go, how do I want to go?
And I think it's important to keep each application on the merits of that application. I mean, it's hard not to think of prior applications and how that one
Each
would fit in.
application is
But
its own.
it has to stand alone,
Yeah.
so, and I think that would come out of the education too, so.
I have a question though for you, Mike.
Hmm.
When I first started, we used to get in our packet,
A location map of the
no,
property?
it was from the previous meeting, if we did an approval, we used to get,
Denial notice?
no, we
The
used
notice
to,
of decision?
notice of decisions, and we haven't gotten them for a long, long time.
Because you haven't decided anything for a long time.
No, there's been several.
I've had.
Say, the last packet didn't have an NOD because,
That was the
Probably
one
should
up
have, didn't
with
it?
the big stone.
With the hall,
Yep.
The Hall
And then
property?
the Hall property.
Did that not
And
come
yeah,
through?
Miles property?
We didn't get one for the
Miles,
Hall
too.
property. We didn't get one for,
oh, we can dig up those copies.
I keep
Yeah.
them all, so there's
Yeah,
quite
sure.
a few. And then Bonnie Miles, the one that we approved
Miles,
last time,
yeah.
that one wasn't in the packet.
I think that's my fault. I didn't think of it. I was so focused on trying to write this memo for the campground, that I needed to get that out.
I saw you working that.
So I think in this case, yeah, I can get those in the next packet.
Okay.
And thank you, that was very helpful, your
And I,
memoirs
yeah,
of the last 4 months. There's a lot of information, there's a lot of, and the changes by the applicant,
right.
unfortunately, it was hard to keep.
That was my biggest concern, is
You know-
that this board was not going to be able to track the changes that had happened based on testimony.
You almost needed a spreadsheet. I almost put it on Excel because,
Sure,
you know,
sure.
it would have a condition over here, but then the condition changed and it was a correct condition and it was like,
I think the planning level is going to be a very detailed at this point,
Yeah, they're
once
gonna-
they go. I think the planning board's going to,
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't
Um,
think so.
I might, before we end, I was just thinking, I don't know if the planning board should be invited to this site visit also? Because didn't they have the
they
application
have
in
it on
front of
their
them?
thing too.
They will have it. That's a good point. They could be invited to the site
Okay,
visit.
well, I just, is it,
Yeah.
Boy, I feel bad for the tenants. Those aren't very big apartments. They're
Well-
all less than 1,000 square feet. I mean, they're tiny.
My first apartment was 350 square feet.
Oh, a tiny house.
I feel
Huh?
due justice
apartment.
needs to be done and it requires a site visit.
40 by 20 is 1,100 square feet.
Yeah, but you got to count, don't you got to count your cellar?
You can't live in
I'll send out the invitation to the planning board. I don't know who may be able to attend. So they may or may not attend.
Okay. I just thought
But
I'd
I
bring
think,
it up.
yeah, that's good, good
Motion
idea.
to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Did you have a second? I missed it. I haven't said-